Over the years, I have bought and sold a lot of watches. I've had my hands on with many watches. I've kind of traded, bought and sold, and I've had my hands on with a lot of different watches. And I've often wondered, what do you actually get for your money when you're buying a watch and when you're moving up in the price bracket? In this video, I hope to answer that question of what you actually get for your money when you're buying watches, with a few caveats. The first one being that these are all watches within my personal collection. So they are watches that I've either acquired or purchased myself. With these watches being watches from my personal collection, the price point and the price range that they're sticking in may vary kind of depending on how you purchase these watches, but I'm kind of placing them in categories based off what I bought them for and kind of versus their retail price. So let's get into it and let's figure out exactly what you get when you buy a watch. Coming in at our significantly lowest price point is the Casio Royale. So for $25, how much watch do you actually get? This watch has a resin case. It has a metal bracelet. I'm not sure if the bracelet is stainless steel or brass. I'm not actually sure exactly what the material is, but it feels like stainless steel. The module on the inside is powered by a quartz battery, and it has a plethora of different functions. It can tell you the time. It has a world time function, multiple alarms, a timer, a stopwatch, and in the top left of the watch, it actually shows you the analog time. So you can see it if you're used to reading, say, a normal watch, but you also want to be able to tell it digitally. It tells you the time both digitally and analog. It's kind of just a no-brainer option if you really just want a watch to tell you the time on your wrist. For $25, you're not getting high finishing. You're not getting a mechanical movement. What you're getting is really just something that can tell you the time. And on paper, this watch can really do everything that you would need a watch to do. Comparing it to the other watches that we're going to discuss later, the main thing that you really don't get for your money is fit and finish and quality of materials used. But on the other hand to that, for $25, this watch does everything that the watch, even at our most expensive price point, does, but even low-key a little bit better. Now we're in our $100 price bracket, and for $100, you're probably going to be thinking a little bit more about what you're going to be buying. For me, though, it is a no-brainer that if I'm going to spend $100, this is the watch I'm buying. This is the Casio G-Shock Square. This is the version that has tough solar, multiband 6, and comes on a black resin strap and case. And on paper, let me break it down for you just how crazy this watch is for $100. This watch will tell you the time, the date, the day, the month, the year, has a world time function, has multiple alarms, has a stopwatch, a timer, and with it having multiband 6 and tough solar, you are never going to need to change the batteries, and it syncs up to have perfectly accurate time once a day. So on paper, I believe this is literally a perfect watch. The time is always accurate. You will never need to do any maintenance, most likely. It will always work. It will always tell the time. It has 200 meters of water resistance. So for $100, I think you're really maximizing watch for money if you're thinking about it on a logical standpoint. If you're breaking it down into a checklist of things it has, I don't think there's really another watch that can give you as much functions for the price. What you don't get, however, for $100 is you don't get a mechanical movement. You don't get really any type of metals or things to make it feel like it's elevated higher in terms of fit and finish and design. The way I see it, this is really kind of like the logical choice watch. It just always makes sense to buy this watch and to have it in your collection, in my opinion. Jumping up to $250-ish, we get our first mechanical watch. This is the Seiko 5 GMT. But what do you actually get when you're buying this watch? You get a stainless steel case, a mechanical movement, a stainless steel bracelet. The fit and finish for this watch is actually fairly good. I think it's a little bit hard to kind of break down what makes finishing really good. To me, it's a little bit subjective, but in the hands, this just feels like a solid mechanical watch. So for your money, on paper, you're getting a really good mechanical watch for a really good price. The downsides, however, are the accuracy of the watch. For spending a little more than double that of the G-Shock, this watch's accuracy is rated at plus or minus 35-ish seconds a day, which in comparison to the $100 G-Shock is like 350 times worse or something like that. In terms of functions, this watch will tell you the time, it will tell you the date, and you can track 2 other time zones in addition to your local time zone. You can still take this in the water with you as it has 100 meters of water resistance. And I really think the biggest thing that you get for your money when you're buying this watch is that emotional connection that us watch nerds have to a mechanical timepiece. Something about looking down at your wrist and seeing that seconds hand ticking away, for me, just gives this emotional connection and love for the thing that makes me want to keep wearing it and keep looking down at my wrist to look at the watch. However, for $250, you're not going to get a really great bracelet. It's still adjusted with pins rather than screws. The clasp is stamped rather than milled, and it just has some fit and finish and material choices that are not as high quality as they are when you move up the price bracket. Doubling that of our last watch, we are now at $500. And for $500, my choice was the Smiths Everest PRS 25. To give you a very brief backstory on this watch, in the early 1950s, there was an expedition up to Mount Everest. In the early 1950s, Rolex introduced a model called the Rolex Explorer. This watch, the Everest PRS 25, sharing some lineage with that story to the expedition of Mount Everest back in the 1950s. This watch has a 36mm stainless steel case, a stainless steel Jubilee styled bracelet. The movement on the inside is the Miyota 9039. This is the version that has the gilt hands and dial. And something I learned from one of my good buddies is that this is actually one of the last brands who does a true gilt dial. So what is better on this watch over the Seiko for almost double the money? I think the proportions of this watch are a little bit better. It's thinner, it's smaller, it wears better on my wrist. And with this movement being thinner than the previous movement, it's able to be thinner and wear a little bit better on the wrist. I think the fit and finish is also very good on this watch. Though to be really honest with you, I think it's hard to pinpoint if it is better or equal to than the Seiko. They both have brushings in about the same places. They're both polished in roughly the same places. And the depth of the brushing is very, very similar on both of these watches. The one advantage about this watch though is the bracelet. This is adjusted with screws, which in my opinion is much easier to resize, and overall just gives a more solid, rigid feel to the bracelet, and the clasp is milled rather than stamped, also adding to the perceived quality of this bracelet. But for double the money, do you really get double the watch at this $500 price point? Logically, maybe not. Emotionally, maybe. Now we're at $1,000. You're looking at some watches, you're asking your friends and your family if you think they should get it, and they're starting to think that you may be a lunatic for wanting to spend $1,000 on a watch. Here comes the Jack Mason Pursuit Pilot. This watch is 39mm of excellently finished stainless steel, a super solid, super rigid bracelet that has equally as good finishing. The clasp has on-the-fly micro adjust. The links are adjusted with screws. The clasp is milled. Every way you look at this watch, this just feels and looks so solid. On the inside of this is the Le Jouperet G101. And this I think is really a huge step up from the previous movements that we've been looking at. This movement now has a 70-hour power reserve instead of about 38. It beats at 4 Hertz, and it's accurate to plus or minus 5 seconds a day. The previous watches being around plus or minus 30 seconds a day. So on top of feeling more solid, having better looking and feeling finishing, I think the big standout factor for this watch at this price point is the movement mixed with the finishing. But just taking a look at the bracelet on this watch, this has polished edges with the main portion of the link being brushed, and the way that it plays with the light just really stands out as looking very nice. Within my watch collection, I really think the $1,000 price point has some of the just biggest heavy hitting watches for the price. To some, however, brand lineage is really important when buying a watch, and not being around for as long as some of the big names, I think brand lineage is really the one thing that this watch is lacking at. But in comparison to the other watches we've looked at, I think even logically there is a very clear upside to spending this much money in comparison to the other watches. If things like fit and finish and accuracy and power reserve and movement specs are important to you. At $1,000, we're starting to see a nice difference between not breaking the bank, but still getting a really, really good product. At this point, there is something wrong with you. You could get a 2004 Honda Civic, or you could get a watch. And for me, I think one of the best examples at this price point is the Omega Seamaster, specifically the Diver 300M. So for $5,000, what do you get? This watch is made of stainless steel. My version comes on a rubber strap. It has a ceramic 120 click unidirectional bezel, a ceramic dial. This watch has 300 meters of water resistance, a helium escape valve, but it's really the movement on the inside that for me is the standalone factor of this watch. This is the Omega Caliber 8800. This is a COSC certified, METAS certified master chronometer featuring Omega's proprietary coaxial escapement invented by George Daniels. This watch is anti-magnetic to 15,000 Gauss. An MRI machine, for example, is 13-ish thousand. It is shockproof. It is water resistant. It is temperature resistant. It's extremely accurate. And though the power reserve is only at about 56 hours of power reserve, the way that this movement delivers power to the balance wheel, which is part of the METAS testing, means that regardless of how much wind you have in this watch, it's going to be extremely accurate. The finishing on this watch is probably the best that we have seen thus far. The way that specifically Omega does their brushing comes off to me as very luxury. A mix of polished and brushed surfaces really make this watch pop and stand out. And just as a product experience, this really feels like a luxury product when you get it, when you feel it, when you open it. And for $5,000, the whole product experience is just really insane. On a logical side, what do you actually get for $5,000? I really think it is the movement here. To have all of these certifications and specs, there's really no other movements in the mass-produced category that really come close to this watch. But also on a logical level, this watch tells the time the same way that the Casio for $25 tells the time. I just really think what you're getting for the price is a luxury experience with a really good product with really good specs to back it up. At this point, you are insane. Your brain doesn't even function normal anymore. You've likely already spent thousands of dollars on watches, and then you think, you know what? That's not enough. Your heart is set on a very specific watch and nothing else is gonna suffice. You need this watch. At the $10,000 price point, we have the Rolex Explorer 2. But for $10,000, what do we have? This watch is 42 millimeters of solid stainless steel. It's actually 904L Oyster steel, the case and the bracelet. The bracelet is extremely solid with really solid links. It kind of has on-the-fly micro adjustments, but it's really just one adjustment with the Easy Link. The clasp is milled. This has 70 hours of power reserve. It is Rolex Superlative Chronometer certified, which is plus or minus 2 seconds a day. It's a true GMT. It has 100 meters of water resistance. And apart from the complication, this watch can do everything that almost all the other mechanical watches can do on the table, with the one key factor being the Superlative Chronometer certification. Within all of the watches and all of the brand's accuracy ratings, Rolex's deviation is the tightest, with a 4-second deviation from -2 to +2 seconds a day. The next closest would be the METAS certification, which is a 5-second deviation from 0 to +5. So the one definitive thing that Rolex does have, and at this price point you tend to get, is that Superlative Chronometer rating. The finish is nice. This has polished surfaces, brushed surfaces. The hands and the indices are all 18 karat solid gold. And what we actually get for $10,000 is a very solid mass-produced watch. Mechanically, they're extremely solid extremely robust, extremely accurate, but I don't really think I would say that this movement is more robust than my Omega, for example. So for $10,000 really though, what is it lacking? The obvious answer, it's not really lacking anything for the money, and that's where we have a quick side rant. I think there are really two key factors of what you actually get when you're up in this price point, and that is the emotional factor and the design. When you're spending an absurd and ungodly even amount of money on a watch for your wrist, the emotional side is really the biggest drawing factor that I think you really get when you buy that watch. I have been lusting over this watch for years now, and to finally have it just gives me such a love for this watch that it's really hard to describe other than like I'm crazy about this watch. But also from a design standpoint, there's really nothing that really will suffice besides this watch. The Tudor Black Bay Pro basically does everything that the Rolex does, but it's the design and the emotional factor that really propels me towards the Explorer 2. So long story short, I think really what you get for your watch comes down a little bit to logically and a checkpoint factor of specs and features, with the huge question being, is this watch emotionally worth X amount of money? And I think that's a very subjective question to you. But overall, I just kind of wanted to document my thoughts on this topic because I've been thinking about it a lot recently. And I think overall my conclusion is, if it is the watch that your heart is set to get, like no other watch is going to suffice. And truly, no other watch is going to suffice. But there are these little categories, these little pockets of where you just can maximize bang for buck. In my opinion, it's kind of at that $1,000-ish price point. Hint, hint of a watch coming soon. I hope my ramblings made sense and that this was all kind of cohesive and that there was some kind of thing that you were able to take away from this. I thought this idea was interesting, but I'm curious to know your thoughts. Do you think that there is an inherent obvious thing that you get as you go up the price point with watches? Or do you think there's a specific price tier that just knocks it out of the park and is a no-brainer for when buying watches? But I gotta figure out how to edit this and make it all make sense, so I am going to go goodbye.